Hello, I'm you. If you watched my previous video, you might understand why I started this YouTube channel. In that video, I didn't touch my upon past, but today, I want to talk about it. This video might be a bit longer, but I believe it's a significant story to understand my personality as an individual. So please watch it till the end. Usually, I also post videos about Japan, interviews and more on my channel, so I'd happy if you could subscribe. Now, returning to the topic, I'd like to share about my past. You see, I was born in Tokyo and raised there. When I was little, I lived in red brick apartment with my father, mother and older sister. I really loved that apartment. Whenever it was daytime, I have memories of catching bags in the slightly grassy area of apartment's bicycle parking lot. Yes, I adored living creatures. I used to read books about animals and insects every day. I would separate insects I had caught from those I hadn't. And I vividly remember the excitement I felt reading about insects living on Hachijojima, a place I had never been to before, in my field guides. I even remember where those field guides were bought for me. When I was in kindergarten, my dad got them for me at the Kinokuniya bookstore in Futako Tamagawa. Those guidebooks were really thick and quite expensive, so I was incredibly happy. As I mentioned earlier, I had deep love for animals and insects, so I didn't just read field guides. I also read Wild Animal I Have Known by Ernest Thompson Seton and Life of the Insect by Jean Henry Fable. I also recall reading a book about squirrels, although I've forgotten the title. When I was young, my father took me to various places. He was skilled at driving and stood at 178 centimeters tall, which was quite tall among Japanese people back then. I thought my dad was so cool. Unfortunately, I'm 177 centimeters tall now, so I couldn't surpass my father's height. My dad was not only skilled at driving, but also incredibly knowledgeable about directions. Isn't that impressive? After all, back then, there were no GPS navigation systems. I always use GPS when I drive, so I truly appreciate how remarkable it is. He could navigate around Tokyo and even travel to rural places like Yamanashi without using GPS. I still deeply respect my father for that. Most of the time, when I went out with my father, we would go to catch bags of fish. My father was exceptional at fishing, strong enough to handle the boat with ease. I let him handle all the tasks. Looking back, those were really enjoyable times. Sometimes, there were days when I couldn't catch any insects at all. During those times, my dad would leave me in the car and venture into the forest for a long time, searching for insects just for me, and he would always return to the car with a smile, showing me the insects he had caught. Yeah, I think I truly loved my dad, just as I thought. Talking so much about my dad might make my mom jealous, but I loved my mom too. I probably relied on my mom quite a bit. When I was little, I liked being carried by my mom, and I loved her cooking. I remember loving to hold hands and walk with her. You see, my mom used to be a teacher of baking and bread making when I was little, and she always had a lot of students coming to our house every week. I really loved eating the bread my mom baked. Sometimes, my mom would ask me to deliver the bread she made to her students' house for sale, and occasionally, I would use that money to play capsule toy vending machines. I was a bit of a mischievous child like that. I'm really sorry about it. Perhaps it's a similar kind of trait, as a wonder adults sometimes get caught up in when it comes to gambling. By the way, I've talked about my father and mother to all of you, but I haven't yet shared about my sister. The truth is, I wasn't very close to my sisters. Or rather, I wanted to be close to her, but she disliked me. I couldn't quite understand the reason when I was younger. Seriously, the culprit behind me crossing this wall might just be my sister. Well, not necessarily her. It could be my father as well. Anyway, I felt despair being born in Japan, felt the daily pain of living, and wished to die countless times. When I was in first grade, I started playing baseball. Before that, I was into swimming, basketball, and soccer. But when I began playing baseball, I realized how interesting the sport was, and, more importantly, many of my friends were on the team. Because of this, I quit all the other sports. And truth be told, I was really skilled at sports. Right after starting baseball, I quickly became better than my other friends. Whether throwing overhand, sidearm, or underhand, I had decent control to hit my target. However, I had slender frame and wasn't naturally powerful, so I compensated with technique. Usually, we held baseball practice on Thursday, Saturdays, and Sundays. On Thursday, practice started around 4 in the evening after school and went on until about 7. On weekends, we practiced from 8 in the morning until around 5 in the evening. By the way, the baseball team I belonged to was called Yamano Red Eagles, and they were quite a well-known and strong team in Setagaya Ward, Tokyo. The training volume was really high, and there was a lot of running involved. To be honest, I dislike running and couldn't quite grasp why there was so much emphasis on it. I think it's because sports require stamina, so there is a need for running. But running 20 laps around the field from 8 in the morning, followed by doing 20 sprints, did it really need to be that way? And even right before practice ended, we had to do the same running routine again. I used to tell my friends multiple times that I enjoyed this team because I wanted to play baseball, not because I wanted to do track and field. Speaking of which, when I was a kid, I had really cheerful personality. In front of my friends, I would take the lead in cracking jokes, saying funny things to make everyone laugh. I was the kind of kid who would fear something or hesitate to take action. I didn't feel embarrassed much and was always laughing. But you see, I couldn't laugh when I got home. When my parents were around, there usually weren't any issues. However, when my sister was there, I couldn't voice my opinions due to fear. Even if I tried to be cheerful and talkative as usual, I'd invariably face my sister's violence afterwards, and I couldn't tell my family about it, because if I did, my sister would escalate her violence against me. Gradually, I learned the increasing level of her violence through the pain in my body, so I didn't want to go home. I wish the baseball practice would go on forever, just so I didn't have to return home, no matter how tough the running was. The end of running meant going home. However, at that time, it wasn't yet a full-blown hell for me. When I was in 5th grade, I started sensing a change in the atmosphere at home. You see, my mother asked me, who would you rather live with, mom or dad? And my father asked, who would you rather live with, dad or mom? Without questioning why they were asking such a question, I immediately understood. Are they going to get a divorce? I thought to myself. However, I couldn't grasp the reason behind it. There was my kind father, always taking me far away for insects catching or fishing whenever my baseball practice was cancelled. And there was my gentle mother, who would hug me tight, play with me, read books to me, play games with me, and cook delicious meals. I love both of them dearly. That's why my heart ached, and truth be told, it still aches even now. I had to make a choice, a brutally tough choice. I want to tell everyone this. Never make children face such a choice. Families should be able to find happiness together. My choice was to make one of my parents happy and push the other into despair. And I chose to make the choice that made my beloved father unhappy. This was the reason for their divorce. One day, my mother and sister told me that my father had been violent toward them. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't seen it happen firsthand, and I couldn't fathom that my gentle father would do such a thing. But there was one thing that stood out to me. It was his drinking habit. When he drank, he often became angry, and his yelling was frightening even to me. I even wondered if my sister's temper might have been inherited from him. When he drank, His personality underwent a drastic change. Then, one day, my father didn't come home, and the next day, he was still absent. I had no way of knowing what had happened at the time. Through all these revelations, I ended up learning various reasons behind their divorce, and I decided to live with my mother. But I remember vividly the day I felt like I betrayed my father. I didn't want to make my father sad. So, when he asked me which parent I wanted to live with, I told him I wanted to live with him. In response, he happily bought me a toy, even though I had already decided in my heart to live with my mother. I ended up deceiving my father, but it was because I didn't want to make him sad, so I told a lie. And on the day I left the house to live with my father, my mother and sister said to me, let's leave home quickly." I understood and replied. At that moment, my father sat down, lowered his head, and called out my name, shouting loudly, You said you wanted to live with your father." I can't forget that moment even now. It might be the burden of guilt that I've carried. My heart still aches to this day. I apologize for the lengthy explanation, but this is a turning point that led to my despair in Japan. In other words, my sense of hopelessness began here. After my parents divorced, I contemplated whether to quit playing baseball. However, my mother wanted me to continue playing, so I decided to stick with it. I felt relieved to have made that decision. As you might have already guessed, I didn't want to be alone with my sister at home. My mother was always away for work, leaving my sister and me alone at home. I used to wait for her to come back. However, whenever I was alone with my sister, I would endure violence. To be honest, there wasn't a single day without violence. The extent of the violence was severe, to the point where I'd be punched and kicked, resulting in my face turning purple. So, what were the reasons for the violence I experienced? There were various factors, but for instance, if my sister included tomatoes, which I disliked, in the food she cooked, I just couldn't eat it. When that happened, my sister would get angry at me for not eating what she had prepared. This anger would escalate into a frenzy. I've been hit on the head with a frying pan, and even stabbed in the chest with a fruit knife. Fortunately, the wounds weren't too deep, so I always tried to conceal them, making sure no one would notice. In this way, I lived together with the source of my fear. That's why I didn't want to go home. I often wished that baseball practice would never end, and it saddened me when my friend would go home at the 5 o'clock chime. My mother usually finished work and got home around 10 at night. Because of this, I started waiting alone in the park at night. Sometimes, strangers would approach me and ask why I wasn't going home. I always gave vague explanations with reasons even I couldn't fully comprehend. At times, the passage of time while waiting in the park felt too slow, and I would walk alone to the company where my mother worked. Perhaps I might have a chance to see her there. With such hopes in mind, I walked dimly lit streets alone at night. However, I could never actually make it to that company. Despite having a rough idea of where my mother's workplace was, I had never seen it or been there myself, but I think that if I were waiting for my mother alone in the park, I wanted to go and search for her. In the end, I would always return home since I could never meet my mother. Then, I would be asked why I was so late, and I would face violence from my sister again. There were times when I was told to take off all my clothes, and was locked outside the house with the door shut. This happened about 10 times, I think. I would cry out and plead for a door to be opened, fearing what might happen if someone saw me. But if I screamed, someone might actually come. Still, if I didn't say anything, my sister might not open the door. I was at a loss, not knowing what to do anymore. My sister was very cunning. Whenever it was close to the time when our mother would return, she would always open the door without fail. And she would warn me not to tell our mother about it under any circumstances. I couldn't defy that order. With this kind of life continuing every day, It was undoubtedly a living hell. There might be other children suffering even more in the world, but to me, this world felt like nothing but hell. From the 5th grade of elementary school to the first year of middle school, for about 1,000 days, this routine persisted. As I entered middle school, I started attending a cram school. Consequently, my time spent with my sister decreased. While I felt relief about this, I also harbored fear. I understood that as the frequency of violent outbursts from my sister decreased, the intensity of the violence I experienced at once would increase. Gradually, my sister started using not only physical violence, but also metal cooking utensils to hit me, and she began throwing kitchen tools at me, and I was never allowed to dodge them. If I tried to dodge, I would be threatened with even more severe beatings. The school teachers noticed my injuries and asked for explanations. I would always come up with absurd lies, like failing at a baseball slide. The teachers would then say, "Oh, so you are not good at baseball, I see." I was filled with frustration. But I knew that nobody could help me. There were instances when the school teachers got angry, thinking I had committed pranks or stolen someone's gym clothes or sneakers, even though I hadn't done anything. The teachers told me that my upbringing might lead me to do such things, but they warned me never to engage in such behavior. One teacher even said, "You can consider me your father. Don't do anything bad." In that moment, I realized I had no allies. I understood that this world was full of hypocrites and that nobody genuinely cared to help me. I often wondered what my father was doing now. Sometimes, such thoughts crossed my mind. I think it was around fall or winter of my first year in middle school. I experienced pain so intense that I thought my life might be ending. My sister poured boiling water over my arms and abdomen. The pain was so excruciating that I couldn't suppress my screams. While I was always forbidden to scream when beaten, this pain was beyond what I could endure without crying out. Burning and agonizing, I rushed to the bathroom and tried to cool my body with water. But the pain didn't subside at all. It was so unbearable. So distressing that I couldn't stop crying, with nothing else I could do but scream. My sister shouted, "It doesn't hurt. It can't be hurt." I couldn't comprehend it. Why did I have to endure such severe pain every day? Why did my friends have warm families, enjoy delicious meals while laughing, study in peace, and sleep without fear? Why was I even born into this world? I've thought over 100 times that this might be far more comfortable than this. I wanted to escape this narrow world. Like Harry Potter, I wished to venture into a fantasy realm surrounded by magical creatures and enchantments. I longed to flee to an unknown world, away from Japan. Was it because of the conformist mentality of Japanese adults that no one could protect me? Such thoughts constantly occupied my mind. And so, I found myself despairing over being born in Japan, where I was ingrained with the sense of conformity through the education system, taught to align with the opinion of others rather than express my own, leading me to suppress my individuality and live according to other dictates. I grew to dislike myself long ago. The cheerful face that used to smile every day during my childhood had vanished. I constantly began comparing myself to those around me. It's because of our different upbringings, you see. Though the story has become quite lengthy, the reason I fell into despair in Japan can be simply summarized by these factors. Of course, the discrimination I faced from teachers as part of Japan's educational system was extensive, and there is still much left unsaid. However, as many of you already know, I can smile today. I believe that's the greatest happiness. If you will look at my photos from when I started Instagram, you would understand. Maybe even today, I still have few pictures where I'm smiling. That's because I've come to dislike my own smile. I don't want to see my own smile. For some reason, seeing my own smile makes me feel inferior. But gradually, I started to regain my smile. For those of you who have watched my interview videos, you might understand. For those who have seen my recent photo post, you might notice the change in my demeanor. I am slowly reclaiming the person I used to be. As I mentioned in the previous video, I believe this is thanks to all of you and my partner with whom I share my life. Thank you for helping me bring back my smile. Although I haven't achieved at my goals yet and still feel rushed at times, I believe I'm enjoying this year right now. And I'm grateful that I can connect with people all around the world and communicate. Thank you for freeing me from the narrow world of my childhood, from the chain that bound me. I'm still not fully connected to the world. I've never been to a country other than Japan. However, I dream of achieving success on YouTube and perhaps living abroad. I want to travel to various countries, talk to different people, experience many enjoyable moments, as well as challenges and difficult times. I don't want to live a life full of regrets. Even if I had only one more year to live, I don't want to strive to witness the beauty of that time. I want to live a life without regrets. Life truly presents a myriad of experiences. It's not just about the good times, there are challenging moments too. But you see, I think we tend to vividly remember the negative experiences, which makes them stick in our minds. Even though there are many good things happening, people often focus on the negative aspects. I too had happy and joyful moments within despair. I believe that I am who I am today because I've cultivated the habit of focusing on the positive things in my life. For you, there will likely be many challenging times ahead, but there will also be moments of happiness. So, if you are going to count something, count the instance of happiness. It's a magical way of thinking that can guide you toward a happier life. Thank you for watching this video until the end. I don't think it was necessarily an enjoyable video. Getting to know me means understanding my struggles. So perhaps it might have cast a shadow over you. Nevertheless, I'm truly thankful that you've stayed with me until the end. I absolutely need to produce results this year. So everyone, please subscribe, like, and comment on my channel. From now on, I will not only share about myself but also provide valuable information about Japan and upload videos of collaboration with famous YouTubers. And that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for always watching my videos. See you next time.
すごいね。ほんと綺麗だね。